Hello, everybody. I'm Joanna Eldridge, and I'm on the organizing committee for this event, the CIO Symposium. And I want to welcome you to the last panel of the day. We're very excited. Following this is going to be Andrew McAfee, who is an amazing speaker. So we think your afternoon is going to be fun and exciting, and everybody's ready to go, right? Just one quick thing I wanted to make a comment on. One of the things I take care of on this event is I do all the event logistics in addition to a lot of other things. And so part of logistics is making sure the food is here in the tent and your programs and all of that other stuff. In the next couple of days, you are going to get an email with a survey asking you your opinions of everything about both panel content and topics, as well as the overall logistics. Please take the time to take that survey and give us some conscientious answers, because we really do use that to heart. I'd like to welcome you to the Evolve or Perish panel. We're very excited about it. I have to say, in the program, you will see we have one additional speaker who was not able to make it. Michael Relic was called out of the country, so he's not here today. But I'd like to now turn it over to Shawn Banerji with Reynolds, who's going to introduce the panel. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. And I think our missing panelist has actually evolved to the state that he's actually gone completely solo here. But thank you very much to the group for joining us this afternoon. I think we have a particularly intriguing panel in terms of the combination of profiles and backgrounds. When Joanna invited me to moderate the panel, I was flattered, but at the same time, it was an interesting opportunity, I felt, in that during the course of our work at Reynolds, we really investigate the CIO market from a technical aspect, a leadership aspect, and our conclusion is that we're in a kind of a golden age of the CIO at the moment. And I think today's event really corroborated that. We have masters of data, we have security experts, we have people focused on business outcomes. It's just kind of a remarkable portfolio of skills and competencies that the contemporary CIO has had to pull together in order to be effective. And our panel today represents, I think, two individuals have served as practitioners. So they've been CIOs and now have moved on to advisory roles in and of themselves, and perhaps that's the next evolution. We'd love to kind of hear your personal narrative around that. We have a sitting CIO at the moment, and are intrigued to understand kind of where you see the function going, not only in your organization but broadly. And then we have my old friend Stephanie, who brings a research and academic perspective that I think is invaluable, because she touches upon everything from board level visibility to the digital transformation. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly introduce each of the panelists, and I'm not going to go through all the accolades that were in the program, because they really are too many to, I think, cite at the moment. But we have Dan Petlon. Dan has been an operating CIO. Dan's now serving as advisor to several cloud-based businesses, including Box and Salesforce. We have Doug Menefee with Amazon. Doug has also been a sitting CIO and now is working with Amazon Web Services as a CIO advisor. So, fascinated to kind of understand how you're taking your practitioner experience and applying that in an advisory manner. Ricardo Bartra. Ricardo, sitting CIO of a company that, we heard earlier from Brooke, technology is the business. I can't think of an organization where technology is any more the business than DHL. And of course, Stephanie, who's here with the Center for Information Systems Research, and at the moment is specifically focused around the digital transformation that's affecting so many organizations. But with that said, and the introductions quickly out of the way, I think, Doug, I'd like to start with you in respect to understanding, we're at this inflection point where the CIO has gained such prominence. It's evolved from, at one point when I got into this 20 years ago, it was a bit of an out of sight, out of mind role. People would joke about CIO being career is over. People were constantly looking for that next iteration. What can I take on beyond the technology function? And today we've emerged into very much of this business leader paradigm. It's an on-demand world. Consumerization is impacting the behavior of users. How does a CIO reconcile all these various, sometimes, forces that are juxtaposed against each other? and really rationalize it and continue to bring kind of a coherent sense of mission and purpose and direction to their organization. And I want to start with you because of the fact that having been a CIO and now being an advisor to CIOs.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing what's happened and what's been transpiring over the past decade, really. And I think that a huge opportunity here of why CIOs, it's going to sound like a broken record to what we've heard today, is...
No broken records. We only want new and innovative
Only want
ideas.
new and innovative. but I think it speaks to the volume of the audience that are here today for this symposium. And it's about being grounded to the company's mission. And about, once you're grounded to that company's mission, being aligned with those business objectives and the expected outcomes and delivering results for the organization. And then what you're doing is you're applying technology. And the transformation that's taken place has been from a managing things that didn't bring innovative value and looking at more technologies that are on a commodity basis and that you can purchase that now frees up your time. And that CIOs are spending their time focusing in on solving business challenges, playing that translator role that needs to be translated, and then providing leadership to the next generation of technology leaders within their organization that are the individuals that are actually applying the technology into it.
Okay. Dan, kind of building on that a little bit, what is, in your opinion, kind of the one of, if not the single biggest obstacle that CIOs are facing as they go about trying to drive this kind of transition in terms of the role and the orientation towards the business?
So I think one of the hardest things, certainly for me it was, is the being able to communicate in business terms to the business folks, but then at the same time, you have to be able to explain the technology to them in terms that they'll understand. I also worked in a technology company, so the technologists within that company all think they know everything there is to know about technology, and that's a challenge when the focus of the company is fairly narrow, and now we're talking about the broader technologies that really can be applied to the business. And I think that just in general, that communication with your business partners is one of the hardest things once you get into a rhythm of it. I used to say I'd spend probably 30% of my time just out talking to both my peers as well as a layer or two down in the organization, just to make sure that you understood really firsthand what everybody's problems were, what they were facing, and not by going out and asking them, what's your problem, by going out and just having conversations with them and understanding the challenges that they face every day, and then bringing those technology solutions to them that could solve it.
Ricardo?
So from my perspective, I think I would go into being complacent on the old paradigms. We are in a digital economy where mobility, cloud, big data, security from the network to the device, and all of this comes together. And in reality, that complexity is great opportunities. And it's not only that, that complexity, but it's managing lower cost with greater complexity, right? So from my perspective, the CIO has to be also the Chief Innovation Officer. We need to be able to show the opportunities that this entire digital economy brings. And from my perspective, yes, of course, communicating, aligning with the business, all of that is what we are supposed to do. But as a CIO right now, I need to be able to look at what is the actual competitive advantage that I can gain by putting the right technology, by extending my enterprise, by providing different user experiences, by synchronizing in the cloud, by finding real-time, insightful information through big data analytics now, exception management versus just looking at reports. So having that vision and having that appetite to take risk is absolutely a defining moment for a CIO, and it's exciting.
Stephanie, what is your research telling you?
Well, our research is telling us that actually it reflects everything that has been set up here. We're seeing big changes in time that CIOs are being asked to spend in creating relationships with their peers, as well as some pressures for CIOs to either have revenue lines, meet with customers, or to take on other areas. I think that complexity and digitization are also big areas of opportunity and challenge at the same time. We're seeing that CIOs are not managing all of the digitization in an organization. For instance, our research shows that 20% of digitization spend of your operating budget is digitization, but of that spending, only 39% of that is in the IT budget. So the CIO actually has to develop a lot of communication skills to talk to other parts of the business, has to do a lot of mentoring to make sure that they have the staff and the IT unit to help the other parts of the business unit and keep the infrastructure running. But at the same time, also CIOs are being asked to exploit and get value out of this digitization, even if they don't have control over it.
Okay, so we have now set the table. Now looking at the role, the expectations, what are those threats to the CIO? What's going to knock the CIO off the pedestal? What's going to marginalize the CIO? What's going to make the MIT CIO Symposium relevant because vendors don't want to spend a lot of money to have access to CIOs? What are those threats? Is it service providers because of the cloud paradigm going directly to the chief marketing officer or the CFO or the head of HR? We saw a lot of questions here. You know, people were asking the CIOs, you know, we get pushback on this and that. You know, the CIO in many organizations is still, you know, Dr. No, N-O, not Dr. No, K-N-O-W. And that frustration is being exploited by vendors. Is it the chief digital officer, this new role that's in fact emerging in many organizations, where there's this other uber individual who competes for resources? Maybe it's a marketing executive who's been a power user of the resource. What are those threats? And if you could help us understand what those threats are personally and bring this to life, I think that would be very powerful and helpful. Ricardo, we're going to start with you because you are a sitting CIO at the moment.
Yeah. So I mean, it's quite interesting, right? I'm not going to be chasing cats and dogs, to be honest with you. I think the CIO has to be very strategic on the selection of technologies that are going to add value to the business, are going to allow me to make sure that I optimize my bottom line, but I'm still able to drive business. What does this mean? Am I going to do cloud for the sake of cloud? No, cloud is the point of synchronization. It's a point of flexibility. So where it adds value, I will use it. I mean, mobility is all about user experience, where I can find ways to actually take my telematics, GPS tracking, geofencing situations that will be different in the US versus Venezuela versus Argentina, where I can add that tangible value to the business that translates value to my customers. That is where I would do that. The fault of a CIO or the jeopardy on this is that if you start chasing every new trend, without looking at how it integrates, how that has that interoperability to your backend. Because at the end of the day, all of this, unless it coalesces in a way that makes sense with your backend investment, is just a danger zone that we need to manage correctly. So to bold this up, you need to make choices that are strategically aligned with the business, and you need to make choices with technology so you position yourself in a way that you become the subject matter expert in business terms when you are at the board level, so you can steer the business right.
Mm-hmm. So jeopardy, that's a great word, and it has a number of connotations. Doug, shifting over to you, again, you know, you've been a practitioner, you've been a CIO, you were an early adopter of the cloud. Yep. Now you're with Amazon Web Services, I mean, which is, you know, this incredible tool that's growing exponentially year over year, and frankly creates an opportunity for virtual businesses to crop up. Mm-hmm. External businesses that can compete with legacy enterprises, or in fact giving entrepreneurs the opportunity to quickly prop up businesses and test them that may in fact, you know, not be in synchronization with the governance of, you know, the CIO's strategic plan. you're working with, I'm sure, this entire spectrum of stakeholders at this stage, and it must be interesting as to as a CIO look at you as friend or enemy or both.
I don't know. I'm fairly new with the organization this year. That's not
an excuse.
No, it's not. But the reason why I'm saying that is, I believe that the greatest threat to the CIO is the CIO themselves.
Expand on that.
Without reinventing themselves and continuing to reinvent themselves. And we have human nature is tribal, and we surround ourselves by people of the like tribe environment. And that we run the risk of being closed-minded and can't see the forest for the trees, all those type of analogies that go into play. And that transformation that has to continually take place means that it takes effort, and we can't become comfortable within our own environment. And part of the reasons why I joined AWS is it was such a customer-friendly company to work with from an engagement perspective. And I have a personal life mission of impacting millions of people in a positive way. That's the philosophical aspect of Doug Menefee. And that ability for me to be able to join Amazon Web Services as a cloud CIO advisor and interface with other CIOs and not just share the successes that I had with the cloud journey, but also the failures that I had. And if I had it all over to do again, we all can play Monday quarterback. If we all had that opportunity to be able to do it again, how would we do that? And that interface with the CIOs goes back to the research that you talked about of that peer-to-peer environment. And also recognize there's a lifespan with it, because the longer I'm outside of an operational role is the longer that I can base off of my real life experiences. And I still remember my first month on the job at my previous company. I went to the CEO's office and I said, do you want to be a physician practice management company that delivers healthcare to millions of patients, or do you want to be a software development company? And I said, well, I don't want to be a software development company. I want to be inside of the healthcare space. I said, then that's our core competency, that we have to align technology around being more of a buy and using a commodity than a build custom type of shop. And that's what drove a lot of transformation within our organization.
That's interesting. Now I wonder if that's actually contradictory to what Chip said earlier when he quoted his colleague saying, software is the brand. I think there are very few CEOs that would likely embrace that, irrespective of the pragmatism behind it. Stephanie, on this subject, and your background is particularly intriguing. I didn't mention at the beginning, Stephanie, before she got into technology, actually has a background in organizational science, so kind of the combination of those two. What do you see as that inflection point, that challenge, that insurmountable obstacle? What is, the biggest challenge for the CIOs? I mean, we've got, CISR has how many, 25 CIOs invested in it, sponsoring research?
No, we have 90.
90, so we've got 90. What is keeping these folks up at night? What are you telling them you need to be aware of, because these are the trends, this is what's happening, and selfishly, if you don't sort it out, you're not going to be in a position to be participating a year or 2 years from now.
So what's keeping them up is a lot of the issues that we've said here. They are worried about actually balancing innovation with cutting costs. And they're worried about making sure that they have good data standards throughout the firm so that they can go and take advantage of all of the data that's coming in. They're worried about making sure that they have end-to-end processes so that they can do automation. They're worried about their people, and they're worried about how to get value from the IT investments that are being made. So for instance, how do they work with their business peers to make sure that they're using the data and they're using the systems to work smarter? How do they have the right governance in place so that they can mentor their staff? Those are the kinds of issues. And we, on the flip side, see that when we've talked to the business peers, that those are some of the same issues that they also talk about. They talk about wanting to make sure that their CIO counterpart is able to talk to them and understand the business. They want to make sure that the CIO has the systems running, although that doesn't just define a good CIO. A good CIO, those are the table stakes. They want to make sure that the CIO is bringing innovation and technology to their business problems and solving business problems rather than just looking at it from a technical point of view.
Which begins, sorry.
Yeah, let me add something here, Shawn, because I think this is a very important point, right? Aligning prioritization, whether you're doing customer-facing solutions or you're doing internal projects that are going to better something on the bottom line. That prioritization alignment is crucial. The next very important component from my perspective is making sure that the CIO talks in business terms, right? So how do you become a business partner? How do you become a business enabler? How do you become that business guy that knows IT, but he doesn't really talk about jargon, but he talks about value? Is by creating value on the top line, creating greater productivity, reducing cycle times, and doing all of those things that are relevant to the business. So what keeps me awake is if I do not translate myself into what I have to be in terms of business terms. Mm-hmm. If I just go and take the position of being the guy that loves technology and I can go and geek around certain things, I lose a great opportunity and I lose credibility and I lose the ability of what I have to do in any organization.
Well, and the other thing that is happening too is that the CIO is becoming much more interfacing with the outside customers too. And in some of the work that we've done on digital business models, it's become clear that the CIO has a very important role in creating that customer experience because they've got to they have a platform to deliver, they've got content that they've got to deliver, right. And then that is going to help create the customer experience. So I think that CIOs that are not thinking about their internal constituencies, but also their external customers, those are your CIOs that are actually going to be in trouble.
That's an interesting point. Actually, that's where we're seeing a huge amount of separation at the moment. As the CIO becomes the owner of, as more businesses become platform as a service type of businesses, whether you're delivering a product, a service, content to your customer vis-a-vis some sort of technology provisioned operating model, precepts, multi-tenancy, for example, right. You know, it's the classic hub and spoke, you know, that you guys leverage. The CIO's ability to place themselves with the customer, whether it's enhancing the experience, whether it's driving better metrics and performance, that's essential. We're seeing that mostly in technology companies and service companies, and when I say services, I mean financial services as well as more traditional services businesses. Before we move on though, Dan, what is that, you know, singular event? Is it the CFO boogeyman? Is he or she going to come get you? In your opinion, in your experience, more importantly, what is that obstacle that, you know, the contemporary CIO needs to circumvent or overcome in order to kind of project themselves into this new world order that we're talking about?
I mean, I agree with Doug. I think the CIO's biggest enemy is the CIO himself. You have to get out. You know, you talked about the Dr. No. You can't be the no guy. You have to figure out a new way, adopt new delivery models, whatever it is that allows you to go really, really fast in order to keep up with the business. When you first introduced the question, you talked about the emergence of the chief digital officer. And I've kind of always maintained that role, at least as I've seen it most often described, is a result of a failure of the CIO to work well with the rest of the business. The CIO is not working with particularly the chief marketing officer. And so now you have this new guy who's not either one of them, but kind of does some of what both of them do, because those guys aren't communicating, aren't figuring out what's best for the business together, and then delivering it in a joint fashion. So I think it's the CIO is his own worst enemy.
That's tough stuff. I mean, you're basically saying that an entire new role or function has been created due to, you know, the shortcomings of the CIO.
A big just to add on to that, a big challenge. I believe that you've done really well job with this, and this the same thing that the research is showing is, the CIO can't operate within a vacuum. It's that transparency and the conversation that's happening with the other C peers within the organization. And in many instances, because while all of us sitting inside of this room see a transformation of the CIO. And you can see research going back to the beginning of the millennium on where CIOs say, I want to be more in a strategic type of role. And we're creating that opportunity for us to be inside of that strategic role. But the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer, the chief executive officer may not view that chief information officer inside of that role unless that CIO is bringing the results and taking some risk to have those conversations and taking the tech jargon out of the conversation. Right. It doesn't matter if it's on AWS or on other services that are out there running SQL inside of it, or Hadoop clusters. What they want to hear is they want to hear, what's that result that's coming through, and how is that individual going to lead that change and partner with those other business units that are out there. And sometimes I see, and I would say that this is based off of failures of myself in many instances, that IT was kind of its own island, and it either had its protector from the chief executive officer type of role, but there wasn't the transparency amongst the whole C-suite on what that role of information technology in the organization was, more than just distributing laptops, turning on BlackBerries, administering services, and having the help desk be responsive within a certain service level.
I can tell that's what gets Ricardo's juices flowing. The way he's nodding his head there. So we've come to this agreement that up until probably 2-3 years ago, that the best-in-class CIO for most organizations was the general manager of the functional utility. And that, I don't mean that as a pejorative. They had to run a robust, reliable, scalable, and secure platform that supported the ongoing continuity of the business. When you're talking about complex, regulated, multi-line global businesses, this is no small undertaking. They were strategic in the sense that they were focused and directed towards the outcomes of their organization, commercial, strategic, and otherwise. They had good communication skills, so they were able to interface and build meaningful relationships with their peers up and down the organization. They're effective managers and leaders. They could operate in multi-site, multi-time zone, multi-culture types of constructs, and that was best in class. And boy, they could definitely make sure your ERP was installed and really humming. But 2-3 years ago, with the whole kind of digital tsunami taking effect, and Facebook and Google and everyone else really kind of reaching a next level of maturity, Amazon as well, certainly, it's a new paradigm, and with that paradigm are these new skill sets. So if we look at what these new skill sets, the customer orientation, the external optic, I mean, you go back 5 years ago, it was the rare CIO that was truly externally oriented. Now you've got CIOs at Cisco, at Symantec. They are in EMC. They are involved in not just ideation. Engineering is still often separate, but they're going out and they're the advocate of the product in the organization. They're the person that's saying, I drink my own champagne, I eat my own dog food, and the salesperson who shows up with the feature functionality bag, the CIO customer says, look, it's great to see you again, Rick, and yes, I love playing golf, but I want to hear from Andy. I want to hear from the person who is your stakeholder who's been testing this stuff and tells me why I should be using it. So next question is, what is the key competency or attribute or experience that the CIO of the future is going to need to acquire or develop in order to be able to effectively take on this type of opportunity? Dan?
So I think it kind of goes back to communication. CIO needs to be a great communicator. He has to be able to go out and talk to a customer in terms that the customer understands, and those terms that are important in a customer. Somebody in one of the panels earlier talked about you and your being the key words. You have to be able to put yourself in the seat of the customer, understand what's important to your customers, and then be able to communicate value to them. And it's not just in IT businesses either. Any business where customers interact with your company through IT systems, it could be that the CIO is going to go out and talk about how you're going to build a better system or optimize a system so your distributors can talk to you in a better and more streamlined way. And so it's not purely just for technology companies that are talking CIO to CIO on a technology standpoint. You may be talking to the marketing folks or the supply chain folks at a company, but in order to assure them and find out how you can best optimize the way you work together digitally in this kind of new digital economy.
Stephanie, what are those attributes? Again, let's go to the data for a moment here. What are those attributes that you're finding that the CIO of the future, this evolutionary figure, is acquiring, developing, focusing on in order to remain not just relevant, but to really thrive again in this new world order?
So I don't see one CIO of the future. So I think that in certain industries, you're going to see CIOs who have a very strong customer focus. And so they could have a very strong customer focus, especially, like you said, in the tech companies, sometimes in financial services, where they're going out and they're talking to their customers. And they're showing that they are using their systems and they're helping to sell the systems. That's one type of CIO. In that case, you really have to have some communication skills. You have to have a way to leave your organization behind but still running well because you're not in the office as much. Another type of CIO that we see, and there's not a lot of them, but a CIO that's being asked to manage other areas. CIOs are being asked to enable globalization. They're being asked to become head of all of the enterprise processes end to end. In that case, I think that you need to have skills in envisioning a different kind of organization. Do you have the ability to take something that was a technology but turn it into a service? Do you have the ability to go and have transparent pricing and to think about things from a pricing point of view internally? And again, more communication. I think for all of these, communication is very big, but I don't think there's going to be one kind of CIO. I think it really does depend if you're going to move toward a more customer-oriented, or are you going to become really managing all different kinds of areas. In some of the research that we've done, we've seen CIOs manage entire shared services organizations rather than IT organizations. Sometimes we've seen CIOs do things like manage sustainability. It's an odd mix, but I think it means that you have to be ready to learn and see a bigger part of the organization. And again, I think having a service orientation.
So let me share just a perspective. I see this in three different angles, I would say, right? One is the new CIO. We need to understand that we no longer are the builders of everything. So build versus buy. I'm going to buy more. I'm going to integrate more. I'm going to use absolutely great architecture. I'm going to use open architecture so I can do so with everything, right? So transcending the before to the new is being really good at integration. On business, I definitely need to stop being the corporate tax. I mean, traditionally, do less with more, sorry. Do more with less. I wish it would be the other way, right? Right. So, I mean, clearly, greater complexity, lower cost, right? And I need to find greater value. But from a business perspective, I need to be able to become that leader that is able to understand that and bring innovation based on the new paradigms, right? Mm-hmm. But there's one that is the most important, which is basically being a great leader. Today, the biggest challenge of every CIO, and I assure you that many of us have this challenge, we don't have enough talent. We don't have enough, hey, we have all of these guys out of Arizona State University or Georgia Tech or whatever that are ready to be in the workforce. We need to nurture an organization that is able to be a learning organization. We need to be able to transcend the fact that unless we get involved and influence where we can influence, that talent pool is never going to be enough to meet our demands. So it's the technology transformation, is the business role that we have today, and is going to be even more emphasized in the future, going and doing marketing and sales calls and being the example of what we do. But leadership, from my perspective, a CIO has to be not only a good leader, it has to be a great leader. And it has to be able to communicate and do all the stuff that we do, because at the end of the day, we got to manage costs. But we got to be able to also look at our talent and nurture that talent for the future. That is very pivotal for me, because honestly, one of the biggest challenges today is exactly that.
And in fact, our research is showing that CIOs are not spending enough time mentoring. Really, a very small percentage of their time is spent mentoring.
That's exactly what I was going to add. Is the leadership capacity, but it's also that mentorship. So as we evolve, right, we take on more. We have to give something up. And I can't tell you the number of individuals that I had conversations with within my organization that they were highly technical and they wanted to be promoted into a management position. And the reason they wanted to be promoted into the management position was anything other than the ability to really be able to manage people and manage processes. They saw it as career development, they saw it as their salary increase, they saw all these type of things, but they weren't passionate about being able to manage people, and they did not want to give up their technical skills. So I'm a great example of that. I gave up my technical skills. You asked me to install an operating system on my computer. I could fumble through it, but it's going to take me a while to be able to do that. I had to give up something to do something more, to be passionate about that. And so one of those skill traits is that the CIOs have to be willing to let things go, be mentors to develop that highly technical staff, because what businesses want today, they need the technical individuals that can implement and do the integration type of services, but they also need that second layer and third tier, and I hate hierarchical charts, but those layers outside of that, away from that core group, they need those individuals to be thinking in the same way that this man is right here, and knowing that this is the vision, this is the approach, and not being resistant to that. Right?
It's interesting. I actually did a little bit of looking at the data before our panel, and I wanted to see out of the Fortune 500 how many of the sitting CIOs I had interacted with in the last 20 years, and I think the number was something like 333, which is a pretty decent number, which just goes to show if you do something long enough, good things will happen. But one comment I would make is we have never seen a great CIO who was not a great leader, who was not a magnet for talent. The other piece, though, that we also have discovered is that these jobs, based on all the reasons we've discussed today, plus many others that we've heard over the course of other panels, the jobs are bigger than any one individual now. And it's impossible to, in a sustainable manner, be an effective ongoing CIO without building out an organization around you. In some cases, organizations of peers, where you may be the hub that this universe kind of revolves around, but the people who are in these other roles, technical resources, program resources, security resources, whatever those resources may be, are in fact really your peers in respect to their stature and their ability to help drive the strategic agenda as well. So that's incredibly insightful and appreciated. We're going to only have a few more minutes before we have to go to questions here. Looking at the next generation of accountability now, we've discussed that a little bit. Shifting gears, one of the areas that the CIO of the future is becoming more and more visible in is at the board level. And that's something that's also very new. If we went back 2 or 3 years, we saw very little representation of CIOs on the boards, and very often the CIO was either themselves represented to the board through a report that was presented through a CFO or another individual. Upon occasion, you would find a CIO on an ad hoc basis presenting to a board of directors because of a specific strategic initiative or investment. But now we're seeing a board-level interest in technology, some of it precipitated by security, some of it by the digital transformation, social mobile, but it's there now. The seed has been planted. Love to get your thoughts, and Stephanie, I think we'd like to start with you about the CIO and the board, because that is a fundamental change that moves this role from the back office to the middle office to really a different realm in respect to how the CIO is viewed within the organization, the value of the role, and correspondingly the expectation around IT. Because when you've got board-level visibility, that means you have board-level accountability.
Absolutely. My colleague Peter Weil and I have started a project this year on CIOs and boards, and what do boards need to know about digitization, and what do CIOs need to inform their boards about. So we've just started. It's surprising how, at least from my cursory glance, how few boards seem to have IT committees. We're running a poll right now on the CISR website, and it's really a minority of boards that have their CIOs present to them at every meeting. And what is striking to us is that the issue that boards and CIOs are talking about right now are not actually, they're strategic in a reactive sort of way. So it's about security and privacy, but they're not talking very often about how is digitization going to change your business model? How are you going to get disrupted? What is happening here? And what can IT and digitization do to alleviate or to stop this kind of disruption? It's a new project. I think that we're going to see over the next couple of years much more interaction between boards and CIOs. And if you're interested, like I said, we have a poll, and keep up, because that's what we're seeing right now.
But is this an area, we'll come right to you, Doug. Is this an area of risk? Is this, though, that the board has not historically viewed the CIO as an appropriate resource when it comes to this type of contribution? And they're saying, let's get a CDO, let's get this chief digital officer, because that person is going to have the commercial orientation. And where we're going with this is that this is, this is the golden age, but it's also the press. Things are great before they completely fall apart. And I think I think some of us recognize that as great as things are, if we don't take this step forward and really, cement our relationships and profile at the board level, we actually risk being marginalized and going back into this very much kind of systems leadership role, which is an important role, a well-compensated role, but is not the kind of strategic business impact that I think most CIOs aspire to.
I'm not even sure, though, that this has risen to a lot of boards' agendas as something that is so important that they should talk about it every meeting that they have. But I think that you do have a valid point there about how do they think about the CIO and what the CIO's role is?
I was just going to say that in my former role, I worked from being hired as the chief information officer and then being put on the executive committee of the organization and then being put on the board. And what I recognized was I could not show up for each one of those roles as the chief information officer. I had a responsibility and I had a different job description on the executive committee because I'm having to think about things that are not specifically inside of my domain and giving input on other areas. And same thing at the board level that goes with it. That ability to be able to present at the board is critically important. But again, I feel that CIOs that serve in some type of board capacity, and it may not necessarily have to be the board of the company that you work for, but being able to be given permission to be on the board of another organization so that you can get a different level of perspective and that you're not thinking about it from within the weeds. You're thinking about it at that executive leadership and decision-making level within the organizations.
So, I do think that in the last panel up here, Brooke had talked about how every business now everything runs on technology, everything's becoming digital. So those boards that haven't elevated IT visibility into the board are kind of missing it. And as things progress and more companies, whether you're making wheels for trains or whatever it is, even heavy industry, as more things and more of the business run on IT systems, that will become more and more important to the boards. And the ones that have jumped on it early, I think are kind of leading the way and are going to be in a better position against their competition.
The door is open, Ricardo. Are you stepping through or are you stepping back?
Yes. So there's so much to say, but let me just...
have a debate just on this.
Yeah, no. It's interesting. From my perspective, the board wants to have an insightful business person that happens to know IT. It's very relevant to make sure that we understand that we need to talk in business terms. What I said before. And really, for instance, I'm one of the few, based on this type of statistics that I present every month to the board. There is an Americas board that I present to, and I got to come prepared, and I got to talk about business value. I need to talk about transformation. I need to talk about, all of those type of things. Today, really, in everything that we do, technology is there. If we have a CDO, and great things happens with CDOs, but CDO cannot be an island. I really coincide with Doug from that perspective. With Dan, I'm sorry. Why? Because at the end of the day, if I leave the gap is going to be filled, and it could create tremendous complexity. I also did consumer business before, so anybody knows that in a consumer business, if you have multiple brands, you're going to have multiple sites. You're going to have multiple ways of doing things, but if you don't integrate at the back end, my God, it's great complexity. So if you don't transcend your role to understand the business, understand the value that is expected, and really come up with the innovation to bring that value, along with the transformation and everything we have to do. Nobody's going to tell us, hey, Ricardo, you're doing so good, so you can just blow your budget 5% this year. No way, Jose, right? No. I got to be good at that, but I also need to make sure that I understand what is expected from me. A CIO at the board, from my perspective, adds a tremendous competitive advantage to a business. Today, information is a value chain, and that value chain touches everything that we do. If we are good at knowing what are the pain points, and even better understanding what are those points of opportunity, a business will flourish.
So if information is the critical asset, and the CIO is the custodian of that asset, his or her ability to productize it and monetize it effectively in the marketplace.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
That's it. Couldn't have said it better myself. If we have any questions, we have about 5 minutes. Mike's in the front. If not, I know that the bar will be open in about 5 minutes as well. So.
Hi, thank you all. Thank you all for this great conversation. I'm a serial CIO, CTO, and have faced many challenges that you have. So several years ago, CIOs were referred to as career is over, perhaps likened to the fact that there would be a chief electrical officer when electricity was found. So, and they predicted the death of CIO roles, et cetera, and that hasn't happened. So luckily for me, and for all of us. But the question is why? I'd love your perspective.
I'll jump in. I'm not shy. I believe why is because there are more solutions to be able to buy as a commodity. And this cloud stuff and whatever, and I fully agree with you. And in my past presentation, I said, don't buy the cloud because it's marketing and everybody else is doing the cloud. You have to align it with the business that goes in place. But what it's done is, it goes back to what I talked about, is it's taking a burden off of resources, and that you can utilize it as a commodity, and then you can apply the knowledge capital that you have into other areas of the organization as opposed to highly repetitive, low value, high cost type of areas for the organization. So with this transformation that's happened over the past decade, and whether you want to call it SaaS, PaaS, private, public, it's the cloud, the reality is that is technology, and the cloud creates a new opportunity for CIOs to reframe that conversation with the organization, the senior most executives in that organization, on how to reposition how services are delivered. And I believe that probably the majority of the individuals sitting inside of this room have already done that, but your research shows that there's still a group of peers that have not done that. And to the point of the title of this, Evolve or Perish, to help those individuals along, we have to be able to help them get that message so that they stay successful inside of their job roles, unless we want their jobs.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, so I think we need to transcend from Chief Infrastructure Officer to Chief Information Officer, honestly. And I think that that role has never gone away, nor will go away, because complexity is just going to get even more interesting. I don't say worse, I say interesting. more opportunistic. This complexity is a great opportunity from my perspective. So what's going to happen is that there's going to be revolving doors. The CIO that doesn't come up to play the role that he or she needs to play, then there's going to be a revolving door there. But the role, if anything, is going to be so intrinsically woven into the things that we do in the business world. So by definition, it's a good news for all of us. The big challenge is what do we do to actually transcend what we're expected to be.
And some would say in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So on that note, thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you to our panel. Great job.
Thank you.
And we'll adjourn.
Thanks so much.